Good evening, everyone. So today we'll be looking at conditional statements and loops in Java. And the objectives for today's lesson, we'll be looking at the different types of conditional statements that we have in Java. If else, nested if else statements, laddered if, and this is the if else if. We'll be looking at the switch, break, and continue. And for the loops, we're looking at the while loop, do loop, and for loop. And moving on to the next slide. So conditional statements can also be considered as decision-making statements, and it's also similar to making decisions even in our real lives. So in programming, we also face some situations where we want a certain block of code to be executed when some condition is fulfilled. And then programming languages uses control statements to control the flow of execution of programs based on certain conditions. And then for conditional statements, the first one we'll be looking at is the if statement. So for the if statement, that's what we'll be looking at first. And the if statement is considered to be the most simplest decision-making statement in Java, and it is used to decide whether a certain block of code or statement will be executed. And this means that if a certain condition is true, then a block of code or statement is executed, and otherwise, if the condition is false, then nothing happens. And this is what happens in an if statement. And the syntax for if statement is just what I have down here. If this condition is true, then everything within this curly brackets, which is either going to be a statement or a code, will be executed. And I also have a graph, a diagram that I got from geeks4geeks.com. So what this diagram is showing us, this flow diagram is showing us is if our condition, this is a condition symbol. So if this condition is true, then the body of the if statement is executed, and if it is false, nothing happens, and then the statement below the if statement is executed next. So we're going to do a lot of examples today, and I'm sure it is pretty straightforward if you understand what each one of them are doing and how you'll be able to implement some of them in your programming tasks that you'll be doing or wherever you want to use them. So we'll be doing loads of examples today, and I'll try to finish before 10 p.m. to answer some questions. So if you have any questions at the end, just keep them to the end of the class. I'll spare 5 minutes to answer any questions that you've got. So for the if statement, it is the simplest, and the syntax is if a condition is true, then a certain block of code is going to be executed. So for this, I'm going to do some examples now, but I want to do it with the next one. Actually, I'll just do an example per statement. So for the if statement, this is the syntax that we're going to be using. So we're going to move on to our IntelliJ IDE now to see how that is going to be executed. Can we all see my IntelliJ now? I think I need to increase my brightness. Sure, we can see the screen now before I move on. Good. So I've created a project already called Conditional Statement Loops, and I'm going to create my first Java class now. So I'm pretty sure we know how to create a Java class now. So we just right click on New and Java class, and I'm going to call it if statement. Perfect. Public static void main. And in here, I'm going to first declare a variable, and the data type is int age, and giving it a value of 10. And I'm going to write an if statement now, and I want my condition to be if the age is less than a certain number, I want something to be executed. So if, then the condition has to be in a bracket, if age, which is up here, is less than 13. If age is less than 13, and I'm just assuming that I have a website, and for that specific website, I want only people above the age of 13 to be admitted into the website and also accepted as well. So for this particular example, the age is less than 13, and if you are less than 13, I want to give you like a warning or a statement to say you must be above the age of 13. So how would I do that? That is going to be me using the system.out.print line. And what do I want to be printed out? You must be above the age of 13. And I'm not going to forget my semicolon at the back. And after the if statement, I want something else to be printed. Line. I think I'm getting some feedback here. And please leave some feedback. So what is this if statement doing? What is this if statement doing? If the age, which is 10, is less than 13, I want this particular block of code to be executed. And you can see that this the line 8 is not inside the if statement, so that's going to be executed afterwards. So now if I'm to run this is going to print out you must be above the age of 13 because this condition is true. 10 is less than 13. Is this less than? Oh, 10 is greater than 13. I actually want it to be 10 less than 13. So if 10 is less than 13, line 6 is going to be printed out. And then line 9 is also going to be printed out. Because 10 less than 13 is going to come out to be true. So if I'm going to run that now, run if statement. Taking a while. Perfect. So it printed out you must be above the age of 13, and it also printed out please leave some feedback. So now if I'm to change this to 15, what do we expect to be printed out? What I'm expecting to be printed out is just line 9, because this condition is going to come out false, and then this line 6 is not going to be executed, and it's just going to move on to line 9. So line 6 is going to be skipped because this condition is coming out to be false. So if I'm going to print that out, that is going to print out please leave some feedback. And let's see. Please leave some feedback. So that is how if statements are used. So now we're going to move on to the next type of decision-making statement that we have, which is if-else. So this if-else is also similar to if, but it makes, so the if-else tells us if a condition is true, it will execute a block of code, And if that condition is false, it's going to execute the next block of code, which is going to be included in the else part. So this is where the else statement comes up. And then, like it says, the else statement is used if the if statement, no, the else statement is used with the if statement to execute a block of code. So the else statement executes the parts where the condition turns out to be false. So if we see from the flow diagram here, we have a test expression which we are going to decide whether it comes out true or false. So if it is true, the if block of code is executed, and if it is false, the else block of code is executed, and then the rest of the statements after the if statement is going to be executed. So I'm going to give you some examples on how that works. Back to here. So I'm going to create another Java class called Ifelse. And in here, I'm going to declare and initialize a variable called age. I'll use the previous example I was using before. And then I'm just going to copy this again. And for my else, this is my if age is less than 10, print this. And I want to have an else statement if the condition turns out to be false. Else, that in my curly brackets, I want you to print out else, welcome to my website. So what this program, this Java class is going to do is, if the age is less than 10, it's going to print out you must be above the age of 10, and then it's going to skip the else part because this condition turned out to be true. 10 is less than 13, true. And once you must be above the age of 13 is printed out, it skips the else part and then it moves on to the next set of code, which is line 11, saying please leave some feedback. But if my age is greater than 13, then it's going to print out, if my age is greater than 13, then it's going to print out, welcome to my website, please leave some feedback. So right now we have 10 to be our age, and 10 less than 13 turns out to be true. So the true prints out the if the condition is true, the if part of the statement is printed out. If the condition is false, the else part is printed out. So now we're going to run this block of code, if else. Now you see, because the condition is true, it prints out the if statement part, which is you must be above the age of 13. And then it also prints out, please leave some feedback, which is outside the if else statement. So now if I'm going to increase my age to 23, for instance, my age is 23. 23 is less than 13, true or false? False. So what's going to be printed out? The condition turns out to be false. Then I'm expecting my if else statement to print out, welcome to my website, please leave some feedback. So now we're going to run that now. Welcome to my website, please leave some feedback. So that is how the if else statement works. And I hope we are getting the hand of how each of them works. They are actually the same, but the only difference is the if statement does not have an else part, while the if else has the if and the else part, which executes the if when the condition is true, and the else part is executed when the condition turns out to be false. So now we are going to go on to the next type of condition statement, which is, actually we are going to look at some facts about if-else statement, and I'm going to do some further examples on how they can be executed, and also what to also watch out for. So this line of code, moving on back to our IntelliJ, I'm going to create fact 1. I'm going to look at some facts about if-else statements. Okay. So for the if-else, let's quickly look at the code again to bring it over to IntelliJ. So we have an initialization and declaration of an integer called x equal to 0. And then our if-else statement, if and then I'm just going to copy the assembly out here. Now, I want my output to be different. Print hello world, and the else part I want it to print hello Java. So the if-else statement here, we can obviously see something is wrong because we can see a red line under the X part. So there's one thing you need to consider. This above program is going to be invalid. It's an invalid program, and it's going to give us a compiler time error because the condition of the if is not a Boolean. And Boolean means true or false. And you can see that the error here says required type is Boolean, but the one provided is integer. So you can't declare an integer as a condition. It has to be a Boolean, and Boolean is either true or false. And the interpretation here is the x is giving it an integer value of 0. So we are basically saying if the condition is 0, so that's if 0. So we can say, instead of putting the x here, we can even put a 0 here, and it's still going to give us an error because it is not a condition. So it's basically saying if 0, print out hello world, and else print out hello Java. But this is not a condition, so this code is not even going to run. So if I try to run it now, I'm going to come up with some errors. Exactly. Incompatible type. Integer cannot be converted to Boolean. So our condition within an if statement has to be a Boolean, either true or false. It can be an integer or a byte or any other data type. It only accepts Boolean. So if we have another example, so assuming we have only declared the integer here as is x, and we are giving it an initialization in the condition part to be x equals to 10. This is also invalid because we are basically saying if 10, it is not a valid condition. We're just basically assigning 10 to x. So this is also going to give us a compiler time error, and it is not a valid program. And the equal sign here is not a comparison operator, it's just an assignment operator. So it's basically assigning x value to 10. So this is an invalid program, and it is not going to run, and it will even execute the if statement that we want it to. So assuming we are looking at a different example, which is assigning x equals to 10, And then we turn this assignment operator to a comparison operator, which is one of the things we looked at last week when we're looking into operators. A single equal sign is an assignment operator, while a double equal sign is a comparison operator. It's going to compare what is on the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the operator. So basically, this is comparing the value of x here, which is 10, with an integer that we just have, or a constant, which is also 10. So we are basically saying if 10 equals to 10, which is turning out to be true, 10 is equal to 10. So this is going to print out hello world, else print out hello Java. So what do we expect to print out here? Since this condition is going to come out to be true, 10 equals to 10, true or false? True. So we are going to print out hello world. So let's give that a try now. Hello world. So if we are to change this condition to be false, so we'll say 25. So we are basically saying, we are asking ourselves, oh, this condition here, is it true or false? We are just comparing 10 and 25. Is 10 equals to 25? False. So this is going to print out hello Java, which is in the else part of the statement. And remember one thing, if the condition is true, it prints out the if statement code, and if the condition is false, so if the condition is false, it's going to print out the else part of the statement. So now we are expecting our program now to print out the else part, because 10 is not equal to 20, which is false. So if we are to run this, this is going to print out hello Java. Exactly, printing out hello Java. So the next fact that we're going to look at, I'll create another Java class for that, call it facts. So we've looked at 3 facts now, but I'll just call this fact 2. Copying this to this. So now we are going to have a data type, Boolean B equals to true, and our if statement, if B equals to false, print out, I'll just copy this as well, copy, paste. So if B equals to false, we've already assigned true to B. If B equals to false, which means that our Boolean value is going to be false. So I want it to print out hello Java. And then we have even though we have an assignment operator here, we are still assigning the value of false to B. And because this is going to come out as a Boolean value of false, this program is actually a valid program. And if we are to execute this is going to execute hello Java, because the condition here is false. So let's give that a try. Hello Java. If we're going to do another example, but this is going to involve comparison operators, I'll give this to be equals, and I would actually not that one. The condition here would have the comparison operator here, and I will change this to true. Even if we leave it as false, okay, let's leave it to true for now. So we are comparing the actual value of B, which is true, with the Boolean, with a random Boolean value true. So we are comparing if is true equals to true, are the values the same? And yes, the values are the same. So our answer for this condition here is going to be true. So what do we want it to print out? Printing out the if part of the statement, which is hello world, because the condition comes out to be true. So let's give that a try. Run that. that should print out hello world. But if we are doing a comparison of true, false, if I'm going to change this to false now, so we are comparing if the actual value of B, which is true, is the same as false. So we are saying is true equals, or is true the same as false? And the answer is obviously no, false. So the condition here turns out to be false, and this is going to print out the else part of the statement, which is hello world. This is run, and this is hello Java, which is the else part printed out, and that is correct. So moving on to the next part of our slide, we've covered example 1, which is obviously invalid because the condition here is not a Boolean result, it's not a true or false. And if we look at the next one, this is also an assignment operator. It's basically assigning 20, x with the value of 20. So this is also an invalid program, which we've looked at in IntelliJ as well. And then moving on to the next one, I'm just doing a recap. This is a comparison operator, so it's comparing two values, the left side and the right side. Is 10 equals to 20, or is 10 the same as 20? And the condition comes out to be false. So that is going to print out the else part, which is hello Java, and we saw that in IntelliJ as well. Moving on to the next fact, we have Boolean assigned to true, and then we also have an assignment operator here assigning B again to false. So B equals to false, and the condition is coming out to be false, so that's going to print out the hello world. And then if we look at the next part that has the comparison operator, we have false, which we have B with the initial value of false, so we are saying is false the same as false, and the answer is true. So this is going to print out hello world. So now moving on to the next type of decision making or conditional statement, we are looking at nested if. So nested if can be a bit confusing, but if you take your time to understand it, it's pretty straightforward. So that's what I'm just going to explain now. Nested if is an if-else statement that is used when you want to use one if-else statement inside another. And then there is a nested if-else statement, and there's also nested if statement. So if you want to use a simpler one, based on what you want your conditional statement to do, you can use a nested if statement or a nested if-else statement. So if we look at the syntax, it's got if condition 1 is true, it's going to execute. If condition 1 is true, it's going to move into the next if-else statement. So we've got two different if-else statements in this syntax. We've got the first one, which has got its own associated else statement at the last part here. And we also have another if-else statement inside of it. So if condition 1 is true, this block of code is going to be executed and is going to move into the next if statement. And that is the one having condition 1_2. So if condition 1_true is also true, it's going to execute the next block of code inside of it. But if condition 1_2 is false, it's going to execute the block of code. It's going to execute the associated else block of code, which is the one here. But assuming initially our condition 1 turns out to be false, it's going to ignore all the if-else inside of it and move on to the else part to execute the else statement. So if I'm going to explain using this block diagram here. I know it can be a bit confusing, But if you actually understand it and do some reading as well, and also look at some examples and also practicalize, you'll be able to understand it. So this is our first condition that we want to execute. So if this condition is true, which is the first if else, the outer one, is going to move into the nested if else inside of it. So if it is true, it will move into the nested if else. And if the nested if else condition is also true, it will execute the body of the nested if. But if it is false, it will execute the body of the nested else. And if initially the condition that we have turns out to be false, it will ignore all of this because it is not true, it is false. So it's just going to move into the body of the initial else. So I'm going to do some examples now. I know it can be a bit tricky, but I'll do an example to see how that is executed. So we're going to move on to our IDE. And I will create a Java class called nested if. Copy. So in this nested if, I'm going to declare an integer variable I and assign it to 10. And I'm going to add an if statement. If I, which is the value of 10, is the same as 10, this is a comparison operator, not an assignment operator. I'm going to have my curly bracket that we have the statement I want to execute if this condition turns out to be true. Then if this condition turns out to be true, execute this. I is less than 15. This is a nested if statement. I want you to, I'm just going to put a comment here. Nested if statement. System out of print line. I is smaller than 16. And then I'm going to have if else statement. Be another condition. If I is less than 12, I want you to execute this one. I'm going to explain what this block of code is doing now. So this is me trying to explain the if else, the nested if statement and also the nested if else statement. You can use them interchangeably. So my initial if statement is the 1 year. This one with the condition that is comparing if the value assigned to I initially is the same as 10. So is I the same as 10? Is 10 the same as 10? That is going to come out to be true. And if that comes out to be true, it's going to move on to this nested if statement here. Is I less than 15? Is 10 less than 15, true. It's going to execute this. Then it's going to move on to this other one, is 10 less than 12. Then this is a nested if else. So if the condition is true, is 10 less than 12, it's going to execute this one. But if 10 is less than 12, if 10 is greater than 12, it's going to execute this one. But our initial example is I equals to 10. So what would our final answers be? We are expecting two answers in here. So we are expecting 10 is the same as 10. That is true. Then it's going to move on to this one. 10 is less than 15. True. Then it's going to print out line 7. That's number 1. That's our answer is going to print out I is smaller than 15. Then it's going to move on to the nested if to see whether whether the result is also going to be true or false. So is 10 less than 12? 10 is less than 12. True. Then it's going to print out I is smaller than 12 too. Then it's going to ignore this one. So if we try to run this one now, it's going to give us two different answers which are expected. I is smaller than 15 and I is smaller than 12 too. So that is what our answer is. So that is me explaining the nested if statement. I know it can be a bit confusing, but I'm going to have a general example that will look into the if statement, if else, nested if, and also the laddered if that we're going to look at now. So I'm going to have an example that combines all of them all together, and I'll be able to explain a bit further if you did not get it as I was explaining initially. So let's move on to the next type of decision-making statement, which is the laddered if. And this one is the if-else if statement. And this is used when there are multiple conditions to test in a single if-else statement, and it is executed from the top down. So how this is executed is, as soon as one of the conditions is true, as soon as one of the conditions controlling the if statement is true, the associated statement, which is the code inside of it, is executed, and the rest of the ladder, which is the other if else is just ignored. So this is how our syntax is. If condition 1 is true, execute this. So if condition 1 is true, then all the rest of the code, the if else statement, is going to be ignored. So, but if condition 1 is false, it's going to move on. Else, if condition 2 is true, it will execute it and then ignore the rest. But if that one turns out to be false again, it will move on to the next one. Else, if condition 3 is true, it will execute the block of code associated with it. But if condition 1, 2, and 3 are false, then the last else, or if there is a fourth condition, is going to move on to it. Or in this syntax, I didn't have a fourth condition. So if condition 1, 2, and 3 turns out to be false, then the final else is going to be executed. And that is executed when none of the above condition is true. And that is why it is called the laddered if else if statement. So it goes from if, else if, then an else. Or if you want to have another condition, else if, and then the final else. It's always a laddered if else if statement has to end with an else statement without an if attached, just an else statement. So that is what this block of diagram is explaining. So we have the first condition. If this condition is true, condition 1, then statement 1 is executed, and the rest of this one is ignored. And if condition 1 turns out to be false, then we'll move on to condition 2. If condition 2 is true, statement 2 is executed, and then the rest of the conditions are ignored. But assuming condition 1 and 2 are not true, they are false, then move on to condition 3. If condition 3 is true, then statement 3 is executed, and then the last part is ignored. But assuming condition 1, 2, and 3 turns out to be false, then your else which is the ending, how you end your if-else if statements, that one is going to be executed when none of these conditions are true. So that is when the else is going to be executed. So I'm going to look at an example now at how that is executed in our IntelliJ IDE. So I'm going to create another class called laddered if, and I will copy this one, copy just line 2, laddered if. So in the laddered if program, I'm going to declare and initialize a variable called I with a value of 20. And then I'm going to start my laddered if-else if statement. If, just bear with me, I'm going to write it out and explain what it is all doing. Just going to print out a line of code here. Then I'm going to have an else if, this is my condition number 2, I is the same as 15. And I'm going to have another else if with condition number 3. And I'm going to have my final else that will be executed when none of the 3 conditions are true. So I'm just going to change my wordings, 16, 20. So what am I doing here? I have an initial value of 20 assigned to I. So I want to compare whether I is the same as 20. Is I the same as 20 in my condition number 1? False. So this is not going to be executed. It's going to check the next condition that I have, which is else if is I, which is 20. Is 20 the same as 15? False. Then it's going to skip this one, then move to the next condition. Is I, which is 20, is 20 the same as 20? Yes. So this is going to be printed out. I is 20, and this final else is going to be ignored because our condition has been fulfilled here. So if we try to run this one now, our final answer should be I is 20. I is 20. So assuming I want I to be the value of 10. So what would our answer be? It is obviously going to fulfill the first condition since we are comparing. Is 10 the same as 10? Then this is going to print out I is 10. So let's run that code. I is 10. But now I want to assign a new value to I and give it a value of 100. So what is going to be executed here? Now the code is going to go through each command to compare the values. So is 100 the same as 10? No. False. It will move on to the next condition to see whether it validates that. Is 100 the same as 15? No. Then it moves on to the third condition. Is 100 the same as 20? No. Then it executes the else part, which is only executed when none of these conditions are fulfilled or when the conditions turns out to be false. So if we run this one now, it's going to execute with, it's going to come out as I is not present, which is true. I is not present. It's not a value of 10. It's not a value of 15. and it's not a value of 20. So this is how the if-else if, which is also called the laddered if statement, is executed. And I hope this one sounds pretty straightforward, and I hope it's also you also understood it. So now we're going to combine the four statements that we've looked at, which is the if-else, nested if, and also the laddered if statement all together in one example. And I'm going to use the first example that I had initially to do that. So I'm going to write my line of code now, and I'll explain everything later on. So I'll pick some of them from here. Just bear with me for a moment. Congratulations. Perfect. So that is me done. So I'm going to try to explain what this is doing. So I want my first. So this program contains the if statements, if else, nested if, and the laddered if statement all together. And I'm going to explain what each line is doing. So if we want to compare the age, if the age is greater than 13, it's going to execute line 6. Welcome to my website. So I want whoever wants to sign to my website to be above the age of 13. So if you are over the age of 13 and this condition turns out to be true, then you're welcome to my website. Then I have a nested if. So if the age is less than and equals to 25, less than or equals to 25, that means it is from 0 to 25. And this is the logical and. That means these two conditions must turn out to be true. We looked at logical and last week, so if you haven't watched the video, I would suggest you go watch it. So logical and means both conditions must be true. So if you are between the age of 0 to 25, you are less than or equals to 25, and the age, your age is also greater than or equal to 20, that means greater than or equals to 20 means 20 and above. So I want the condition to print out this. Congratulations, you have won a discount. Then if this turns out to be true, after this one is going to move on to please leave a feedback. But assuming this condition initially turns out to be false, that means you are less than 13 because I want your age to be greater than 13. So assuming the age is 10, 10 less than 13 is false, then all of this is not going to be executed. It's going to move into the next condition to validate whether it's going to be true. So assuming my age is 10, is 10 the same as 13? False. It's going to leave that one again and move to the final else, which is executed when the above conditions are false. And they've already turned out to be false. So my age is 10. So else, this is going to be executed line 14. You must be above the age of 13. And once that has been executed, that is the end of my if else. Then this one is outside the if else statement. Then this is going to be executed that says, please leave some feedback. So let us see how each one of them work. So my age, I want my age to be 21. So let's see it. Let's figure out how many lines are going to be printed out before we run the code. So if my age, which is 21, 21 greater than 13, true or false? True. Welcome to my website. That's number one. Then if 21 is less than and equal to 25, yes. And that means these two conditions must be true. And my age is also greater than and equal to 20. That means 21 is greater than and equal to 20. True. That means these two conditions are true, true and true. Then line 9 is going to be printed out. Congratulations, you have won a discount. Since all of these have been validated to be true, my else part will not be executed at all. So that is the second line printed out. Then afterwards, it's going to skip all of this and move to the statement outside the if else statement. So it's going to move into this. Please leave some feedback. That means we're expecting 3 lines to be printed out. Welcome to my website. Congratulations, you've won a discount, and please leave some feedback. So let us run that to see whether those 3 lines will be printed out now. Welcome to my website. Congratulations, you've won a discount. Please leave some feedback. So assuming the age is 10. So let's figure out what is going to be printed out. So my age is 10 and I'm logging into somebody's website. So it's going to have certain conditions. If age is greater than 10, 10 greater than 13, true or false? False. All of this is going to be skipped. Then it's going to move to the next condition. Is 10 the same as 13? True or false? False. Then this is also going to be skipped. It's now going to come into this one. Else, which is only executed when the conditions above turn out to be false. Else, you must be above the age of 13. And also, after the end of the if else statement, please leave some feedback. So let's run that now to see. You must be above the age of 13. Please leave some feedback. So that is how the if else, nested if, and layered if can all be used together to perform certain tasks within your program, depending on what you want your program to do. So it depends on what you want your program to do. That is what would determine the type of conditional statement or loops that you would use. So let's move on back to our slides. We've looked at the if else statement. Then we're going to move on to the switch. So this switch, the switch statement is a multi-way branch statement, and it provides a way to dispatch executions to different parts of the code based on the value of the expression. So, and then in the switch statement is also a statement in Java that allows you to execute the statement based on certain values in the variable expression. And the variables in the switch statements can only be an integer, a byte, short, char, which is character, string, or a norm. So this, we all looked at them last week, and a norm is a reserved keyword in Java, which we also looked at last week. So the syntax for the switch looks like this. We have the switch and the variable or the expression, and then we have the block of code, which the case value, and we also have the statement that will be executed. Then we have a break, which will stop or exit the code once the first case value has been executed. And then we have the second case value. So if the first one turns out to be false, the second one is moved into. And this is how the flow diagram looks like. And we have the case condition 1. If the case condition 1 turns out to be true, then the statement 1 is executed and then it breaks. That means, when I mean break, that means the code is stopped or exited. But if it turns out to be false, it moves on to case condition 2. And the same thing happens if it's true. Statement 2 is executed and then it ends the switch statement. But if it turns out to be false, it moves on to the next one, then the next one. And if none of the conditions are executed or none of them is true, then there is a default, which is a default statement. It's just like the if else as well. The else executes when none of the conditions are true. But in the switch, we call it a default, which is executed when none of these case conditions are true. Then the default statement is executed and then the program is exited. So we are going to look at two different conditions as to how this is, two different examples on how to execute the switch statement. So the first one, I'm going to create another Java class, call it switch statement. And I'm bringing up my examples. Switch. And during these examples, I'm also going to tell you some specific points to remember about switch statements as well. I'm just going to copy this. So I know that I've mentioned before that switch can only be in int and byte. Actually, I mentioned that after I've written the code and explained it. So I'm declaring a data type of integer, variable called month with the value 9. And this is how we write the syntax for switch statement. Switch is the keyword, switch. Then inside this bracket, we put our variable or expression. So the variable we want to use is called month, and that has been declared in line 3. Then let's not forget the curly bracket, and this is going to contain our case conditions. So I have case 1, and if case 1, if the value of month is 1, I want it to execute this: system.out.println January, then the curly bracket, and I'm going to have a break, which is going to stop or exit the switch. And I'm just going to copy this because I'm going to be repeating them. Paste, paste, and paste. So this is going to be my case 2. case 3. March. And in here, I'm going to put my defaults. And after the defaults, we don't need a break. And outside of my switch, I want something else to be printed out to signify the end of the switch. Out of switch case. Good. So what do we want to do here? We are assigning 9 to the value of month, and I want to print out the 9th month. So this switch is going to take the value of 9 and it's going to go through each of these cases, which are also like conditions. Case 1, case 2, case 3, and default. So this is like an if, and else. So default is standing as the else here in switch statements. So for the month, I want for when the month is equal to 9, I want to validate that in each of these if conditions, which we have case 1, case 2, case 3. So for case 1, this 1 year is also, the 1 year is like a condition. So we are trying to look for 9. So is 9 the same as 1? No. So that is not going to be executed. So we are going to skip this one and move to the next case. That's for case 9. So this is case 2. It is not the same as 9 as well. So we're going to skip this one as well. Move on to case 3. Case 3 is not the same as 9. It says switch label 3 is unreachable because our month year has the value 9. So case 3 is also skipped. Then the default is going to be printed out, which is a default. And outside of the switch statement, I want something else to be printed out. And this is going to tell us out of switch case. So let us run this now. We run this. A default out of switch case. But let us change this value of 9 to 2. So what is going to be printed out? If we have a guess now, we are expecting February to be printed out. And what else? Out of switch case. So this case, the month, which has the value of 2, is going to go through each of the cases to see if the value correlates with the case label or case value. So this is case 1, is not the same as 2. No, skip. Case 2 is the same as 2. So the statement inside is going to be executed. So we want it to print out February. So February is going to be printed out, and this break is going to exit the switch since the condition has been fulfilled. We found that 2 is the same as case 2 here, and it's going to print out the value of March. So once that has been executed, the switch statement is going to be exited, sorry, and then move on to whatever is outside the switch statement, which is out of switch case. So let us print this one out now. Simple. February, out of switch case. So that is how switch statements are executed or used. So moving on to the next one, we have the break. We've used break before in the switch. It is used in switch statement to exit the loop, and it is also used to terminate a loop as well. So we're going to look at one example for the break statement, and this is just a flow diagram to show how it is executed. So if a condition is executed and it turns out to be true, it's going to break yes. And if it is no, it comes out here. But if the condition is actually false, it just exits the loop instantly. So I'm going to give an example of how this is used. We've seen that in the switch statement not long ago. We're going to create another Java class just to have another example of the break statement. Break statement. And done. So for the break statement, I'm not sure. Wait, because we haven't looked at for loops yet. Okay, I'm just going to comment this one out. Since we haven't looked at for loop yet, and I want to use a for loop example, we are going to come back to the break statements. So the break and the continue, we'll look at them after the loop in Java. So after loops in Java, I'll come back to break and continue statements.